Hello everyone, welcome to another Flesh and Blood video. Today, all of the heroes from Rosetta were officially shown, so I have, of course I do this for whenever we get brand new heroes, my initial thoughts for all of them, how I think they are probably going to end up being built, showing some of the older cards and some of the newer cards to sort of get a gist of what cards they might get during the spoiler season, well, I guess when the set comes out, as well as just cards that might already exist that you might want to think about when building these new decks. So with that said, let's get started with Floran Rotwood Harbinger. Floran is one of the new heroes that we saw prior to today, one of the first ones shown. He is a 40 health elemental runeblade who has only access to the earth cards. This set is notable because all four heroes only have access to one element, where the only hero prior to this set to actually only have one element was Icelander. Everyone else had two. So Florian will only get access to earth cards. Florian's ability makes it so if there are 8 or more earth cards in your banish zone, you gain the ability whenever you would create one or more aura tokens. Instead, you'll make that many plus one, sort of like a Mauvrin Skies effect. On the young version, the number will be at 4, so half life, half the amount. That makes sense, but of course we're talking about the classic constructed version. So how is this going to end up playing out? Well, currently we don't have very many effects that let you banish your earth cards. None of the cards we currently have in the format already do that. We do know we're getting a new keyword, decompose, which helps us do that. Just like on the card, Felling of the Crown, this one is notable because it's earth, meaning that both Florian and Verdance can play it. This has an effect that wants us to have earth cards in our banish zone to get more damage, and gives us a bonus effect with its decompose if we do decide to banish earth cards. We'd want to be banishing hopefully 3 earth cards. We need 2 earth and an action, but hopefully that action is an earth card, to get to have both players put a card from their hand in the bottom. In a lot of situations, though, this will be the last card in your hand because earth seems very controlling. This time around, we'll see that a lot more when we look at Verdance, but Florian seems just like a good Rune Chance or Embodiment of Earth setup deck. We'll see that with his spec and with some of the other cards we'll look at today. But this, I think, is a good start. This is just a great M that, but I think both Earth heroes will use very well. Florian reminds me a lot of the Green Guardian Briar deck we saw at the end of her lifespan, where it was a more controlling, blocky deck that abused Crown of Seeds. Of course, we don't have that anymore. If we did, Florian and Verdance would both love it, but we don't. So we need other ways to sort of counteract that, and I think the way they're doing that with just pure life gain is pretty good. So far, we only have one weapon for the heroes, and that is Osilo's weapon. But I do have Reaping Blade here. This one is notable because this is a set that is going to bring a lot of life gain into the game. So Reaping Blade is one you should probably look towards if you're deciding to play really any Rune Blade to stop a hero that is already ahead from pulling even further ahead. And next we'll look at the spec, because this is sort of Florian's whole game plan other than banishing the cards. Germinate is a blue action that costs double X, and it gives you your choice of a Rune Chant or Embodiment of Earth, and then you do that again for X. So if you put 2 into it, you'll make 2 tokens, 4 you'll make 3, 6 you'll make 4. I think it's a pretty good effect. And then you also gain 1 life, X plus 1 life as well. So if you paid 6 into it, you'll gain 4 life total as well. This helps give you a lot of defense since the Embodiment of Earths will let your cards, your non-attack actions, block for an extremely high amount, as well as just the rune chants themselves. Once you turn on Florian's ability, could just be an immense amount of damage if you can make a lot of them. Unlike Viserai, who makes them passively, you'll actually have to work for Florian to make rune chants, but a card like this could just be really, really strong with Florian's ability. Notably as well, Mordred Tide should work, should stack on top, give you an extra rune chant if you were making rune chants. So if you wanted to play Florian as sort of that OTK Viz style, you definitely could, since he'll just passively make a bunch of rune chants. Although I think a way that most people might end up trying to build the deck is sort of just like normal Viserai plus some banishment effects. I'm talking things like Amplify the Arc Knight, Mauvrin Skies. I didn't put that on here, but cards like this that cost less for each rune chant you control. If you can find a way to make a bunch of them, you can have a wider turn. Same as like Runeblood Incantation. This one makes a rune chant every turn, so with Florian's ability, you'll get a second one straight out of the gate. And since you're making extra auras, Swarming Gloomveil is also going to be a pretty good option, because once Florian's active, making one token will give you 2 auras, so Swarming Gloomveil will automatically have the go again and the +1 there, which is pretty nice. Some other cards here I have up. Sonata Galaxia seems pretty decent, considering it costs less for your rune chants, as well as it just lets you get an aura from your deck into play. This one I think might shoot up a bit in price if you don't have these already. These seem like they'll only increase in price as spoiler season goes on. One of the new cards, which I know it's hard to read, this is Thistlebloom and Life. This is a new mechanic called Meld. If you've played Magic the Gathering, this might look pretty similar. Pretty much with this card, you can play one or both of the sides, and they both cost the same amount. So for this one, they cost 0. We'll look at some other ones later. All of them all have the same second side. So the Earth ones are all going to have Life, and the Lightning ones are all going to have, I believe it's Shock. Life just gains you 1 life at instant speed, and since this one costs 0, it will always give you 1 life, since there's no reason not to play it. Well, I guess there would be a reason not to play it. We'll look at that a little later, but Life also blocks 3, or Thistlebloom Life also blocks 3, since the first side is an action. And the front side will create a rune chant where X is the total amount of life you've gained this turn, which is pretty good when you consider that the instant speed of life will probably end up resolving before the Thistlebloom, so you'll always get 1 rune chant out of it. This one isn't a wizard card as well, so you won't be able to play it in Verdance, who is a more life gain based hero, but considering that this Runeblade card gives you life, I think it would be safe to assume that there might be other effects that would also give you life gain, other than something like Germany, which notably both of them don't have go again, so you can't play them in the same turn, unless you find a way to give it go again, which Runeblades do that all of the time. The last card in this up top area we need to talk about is Dread Triptych. The only reason this card is here is because notably its rune chants are made in 3 different abilities, which means if it hits, you've dealt arcane damage and you've played a non-attack action this turn, you'll make 6 rune chants if Florian's ability is active, which is really, really strong. Scrolling down, we do have some cards that might end up in consideration for some Florian lists, but probably won't make the cut in the long run. If there ever is a red line Florian list, which doesn't seem very likely considering how many X-Spell cost cards are, and all of the decompose attacks from the one that we have could possibly be pretty large, hard to play in mono red. We could get cheaper ones that are 0 or 1 costed that a red liner list might work, and Skyfire Lanterns generates you a rune chant, which Floran will double. The next one is So Tomorrow. I don't know if you'll play the red So Tomorrow, possibly just the blue is enough, but notably this one is just a decent card. It is a non-attack action, so it will get pumped by all of your embodiments of Earth, as well as it'll let you recycle some of your important cards back into your deck. The main reason why it's here is because it does banish itself. So with this card, if you get to play 2 of them alongside two decompose effects, you'll cut down the amount you have to play. Of course, we don't know if decompose will require you to banish different numbers, but this can be that 1 extra card to help turn on your ability. Again, I think you'll play the blue over the red. I just have the red in here because it's the basic one. But I think this one could see a lot of play inside of Floran just because it does banish itself. It is an Earth card that does count. Finally, I have a few cards in the maybe board that you might want to look for if you want to play something a little more specific. We did not have a deck that used Channel Mount Heroic very well, and Verdance is not going to use Channel Mount Heroic because she is a wizard and does not play the most attacks. I guess she could. We'll talk about that when we talk about her, but Channel is really usually just a Runeblade thing, and people will definitely want to try this one again with Floran since they don't have Briar anymore. Rune Blood Barrier is an effect that gives you a lot of rune chants and makes them prevent damage instead. This can be a good defensive option. I don't know how strong it will be inside of Floran lists, but it is something I wanted to note since it is something that gives you rune chants and likes you to have a lot of. And then finally, Looming Doom is something that I think could also be in consideration. Since you're making a large number of rune chants, something like Looming Doom could be, say, tutored out of your deck from a Sonata Galaxia. So over the next vast amount of turns, you can have constant arcane damage coming from the Looming Doom. So I do think that there is space for this card inside of Floran, as well as a action that does block 3. So it's the best baseline plus abuses the embodiment of Earth, buffing up the block on your non-attack actions. So I think this one could see play inside of Floran. Of course, we will need to see the cards in the actual set, but I think this core of something like Runeblood Incantation, because it procs Floran multiple times. Of course, you're going to still play Dread Triptych, Germinate. I think Thistle Bloom could be pretty good depending on how much life gain we actually have. And then stuff like Felling of the Crown, if we get more disruptive decompose effects, could make a pretty strong, slower Runeblade, something that we don't really have at all, since Viserai is pretty aggressive, same as Vincent. And most Briar lists were pretty aggressive again up until that end point. So next, let's move on to Verdance. Next, we have Verdance, Thorn of the Rose. She is again, 4 intellect, elemental, wizard hero, but with 40 life. You don't see that on wizards very often. And she has, again, Essence of Earth, allowing her to play Earth Elemental cards. Now, the reason that Verdance is at 40 health is because, unlike every other wizard, she does not have an ability that allows her to play extra cards at some point in the game. Either it be tutoring them straight out of your deck with Kano or the Emperor, or playing them from your arsenal like Icelander, or from your hand with Blaze. Verdance does not have any of those abilities. She is a very basic Flesh and Blood hero. She just has the wizard tag. Similar to Floran, she has an ability that you gain if you have 8 or more Earth cards in your Banish Zone. So something pretty much a quest to do. So you want to do your early game trying to get those cards in Banish and then get Verdance's ability online. When Verdance reaches this goal, whenever you gain life during your turn, you may deal 1 arcane damage to any opposing target, notably target. This can deal with allies, so where you can't trigger it on your opponent's turn, you could still use your life gain to blow up a board of dragons or allies in the future, smaller ones if we do end up getting them. So, Verdance seems like a very slow hero. So how can we actually use this ability? First, this says whenever you gain life. I assume this means that gaining multiple life in one instance won't trigger it multiple times on that. So we need to gain multiple instances of life, which is why her spec Heartbeat of Candlehold could be a pretty good option. This is a 1-cost Earth Wizard action that just gains you 1 life, and then 1 life. So you can trigger Verdance 3 times and do 1 Arcane 3 times. Also, Arcane Barrier will be very good into Verdance at like a 1 if you can only afford 1, because Verdance's ability only ever does 1 at a time. Although, with some effects that she could play, she's going to be able to do a lot more, such as with Channel the Millennium Tree. This is sort of like Channel Mount Heroic, however, instead of giving you +3 on all of your attacks, instead it gives you 3 amp when it enters and at the beginning of your action phase. This is good, of course, with Verdance's ability. If you don't know what amp does, it increases the damage of your next source of arcane by that much. So getting amp 3 will make Verdance's or whatever other source of arcane damage you deal an extra 3, such as like with Waning Moon. Of course, Waning Moon might not be the weapon of choice because you can't play cards on your opponent's turn as easily, but we will have to see what Verdance's weapon is. Again, we don't have all of them. But other than that, we might just see Verdance in a role similar to what Bullander was when Icelander was still playable. That was a slower deck that just wanted to block well, disrupt the opponent, and play efficient 3-cost attacks. We have some pretty old ones as well as some newer ones that could be pretty nice. Final Fighting Spirit is notably one that does gain you life, possibly on your turn, so this one does have synergy with Verdance herself, even though Verdance doesn't start at a lower life total, making these types of cards harder to trigger. It's still a card that notably does gain you life and could be important when deck building with Verdance. We of course can still play Felling of the Crown, because why wouldn't we be able to? And a card that I didn't talk about from the Floran side, we have Earthform. This is a 3-cost attack that comes in for 7 red, and on hit will make an embodiment of Earth token, which is great since you're definitely going to be playing a lot of actions since you are a wizard. Also, this is a promo, I believe it comes from this skirmish season. So if you want to get these, I guess you could pretty early. These look very nice. We'll look at the lightning form when we take a look at our next hero. Some other cards to note. Oasis Respite. Even though the life gain does not trigger Verdance on an opponent's turn, in a wizard mirror, this could be important and could gain you life. Just wanted to note that. As well as just still its life gain, Verdance could see play as some sort of fatigue deck, same as Floran if they are gaining a lot of life, so Oasis could just be an important tool. And we have an example of one wizard action that is a meld spell. This one is Pulsing Aether Life. This one costs 1, so if you'll want to gain the life off of Life's ability, you'll need to pay the extra 1. But I think that's pretty unique with this spell because this is your standard 1-for-4 cast of a wizard action that most pretty much every wizard has access to that Scalding Rain or Aether Hail type effect, but you can pay the 1 extra to turn it into that 2 for 5 since you're gaining a life, so you get that value. As well as, since the first one's in action, you'll need to be doing that on your turn. The life gain from life could also convert into an extra arcane damage. So this spell actually gets a lot of use out of all of its sides. I think this one, maybe even at blue, since it's a blue earth card that blocks 3, could be a very strong tool that you will see inside of Verdance. In the inventory here, just sort of the extra list, we of course have some D-Reacts because we're a pretty defensive deck. And then again, I have So Tomorrow simply because it does banish itself. Finally, the last thing we need to talk about, what card we could probably talk about a little more when we talk about Osilo. Poison the Well is a blue instant that does counteract our life gain. The next time a hero would gain life this turn, they lose that much life instead. Notably, it's only the next time, and a lot of our effects only give us 1 life at a time, but it is still something that if we do have effects that gain us a large amount of life in one effect, Poison the Well could be a card that does punish us pretty badly. But with that, let's move on to the lightning heroes. The first of which being Aurora Shooting Star. She, just like Floran, is a 4 intellect elemental runeblade hero with 40 life. However, unlike Floran, she has essence of lightning instead of essence of earth. Aurora has a once per turn instant to pay 2 resource and make an embodiment of lightning token. However, this ability can only be done if you've played a lightning card this turn. Looking at some of our lightning cards, we of course have some of the staples. Lightning Surge, just a really good 0 for 4 that you'll pretty much just see included. Lightning Form, a newer attack that's a 1 for 5 that on hit makes us an embodiment of lightning. I think this one will see some play. As well as Entwine Lightning, where this one isn't lightning, is again a 0 for 4 with Go Again. Pretty good. Lightning Press might be one of the most important cards in the deck from how many hit effects we have. Not only do we have Electrify, a card that from Tales of Aria was one of the best cards in the format, being a lightning card that gives us an on-hit. We also have Shock Charmers being a possibly good card, as well as the new Burn Up Shock. We will discuss that soon. A card like Lightning Press will be extremely important in the meta. But I mentioned it. Burn Up Shock is a Runeblade Lightning meld card. Shock is the lightning mechanic, I guess the lightning second spell, which just does 1 arcane to any target. Notably, this one does cost 0, so it will be 1 free arcane damage, and it does block 3, which is pretty nice. Burn Up, though, is the card we need to talk about. It reads, the next time an attack you control hits a hero this turn, you deal 4 additional damage to them. Notably, it is arcane, unlike the Electrify just being raw damage. It's easier to prevent the arcane, but it is more for less cost since this one's free, and it lasts throughout your whole turn. So good luck to an opponent blocking you out entirely, especially when you have cards like Lightning Press, which can just push you over. The last 2 cards I do have up here that we need to talk about mainly are just some of the cards from Tales of Aria that I think could be pretty important. Arcanic Shockwave is a 0 for 4 with a Lightning Fusion to do 1 arcane to target hero. This one could see some play considering that Aurora is a deck that makes a lot of embodiment of lightning tokens. I think we could see definitely a red liner Aurora. I don't have Ravenous Rabble up here since I wanted to talk a lot about the lightning cards, but Rabble could be a pretty important tool. I think the Aurora deck is going to plan on making embodiments every turn, so either your first attack next turn or just another attack you need to give go again can get it. So Arcanic Shockwave seems like a pretty good attack that you might want to give go again. And then Rites of Lightning is a 1-for-4 that does 1 arcane when it was fused and you attack with it, but also gets go again if you've dealt arcane damage. Again, just a decent attack that could be good on landing, on hits, if you want to proc your burn-ups or electrifies on those wider turns. Then I want to talk about some of the cards that might be a little more interesting. Shrill of Skullform is a very good Runeblade card, however we don't see it much nowadays since the days of old where Viserai was meta. Shrill at red is just a literal 2-for-7 if you've played or made an aura, and since you have pretty easy access to making auras, it seems like one that you could definitely use. Although it does cost 2, so that's why it's not up above. Could be a card that you won't see, but one that could come out at some point, I think. Swarming Gloomveil is an effect that cares about you making auras. Again, it will naturally have go again, so not very good with the actual lightning if you do play this with it, but on a wider turn, this can be an attack to come in for 4, land said hit effect for these that we always been talking about, and then maybe make some arcane unpreventable. Notably, I believe Burn Up would count as a source you control, so swarming might stop it from being prevented because you're the one doing the damage with Burn Up. I don't know the ruling on that one, but if that is true, swarming could just be an extremely strong way to proc stuff like this. But even without that, Swarming Gloomveil making Arcane Unpreventable could be really strong with like your Rites of Lightning, or be able to end a game. Again, we don't know we don't know Aurora's weapon. It could do arcane damage, it could not. Also, like Shock Charmers, if you have a bunch of extra resource to pay into a Shock Charmers on a Gloomveil hit, you can make that damage unpreventable. And then finally we have Flicker Wisp. It's a 0 cost Runeblade action. It is Lightning Fusion. If it was fused until the end of turn, action card effects you control that deal arcane damage do 1 extra, and then this just does 1 arcane itself. So you can play this alongside said Rites of Lightning, Arcanic Shockwave, those types of effects, and you get that type of damage across. Notably, it won't pump Shock Charmers since this is an equipment doing it, but still, you get your cheaper attacks that do arcane to do more. I don't know if this one will see any play, but I think it is one, again, to note since it could help you on some wider turns where you're doing a lot. There is one card I want to talk about that could be a possibility, but probably won't see play. Technically, you can play Bramble Spark. There is no way to fuse it and get the +3, but you can play it for the 1 arcane. I don't think you will, but hey, I'm just putting the idea out there. With that, let's move on to the last hero, Osilo. Osilo is a 4 intellect, 36 health elemental wizard hero with the essence of lightning. Osilo has a very simple ability, but what I think is an extremely strong one. Osilo has a once per turn instant to discard an instant and draw a card. An incredibly strong effect that definitely needs to be thought about when deck building. Cards like Kindle, as well as one of the new Channel Lightning Valley, are instants that you can discard to cycle them out. Of course, these both draw you cards, so I don't think these will be the ones that you'll want to be discarding, but definitely ones possible. Let's look at a new Wizard Lightning Melt card, Null and Shock. This one costs 1, so you will have a shock for 1. But Null is a pretty interesting effect. If a target instant has cost less than the total arcane damage that you've dealt to an opposing hero this turn, you negate it. Which means if your opposing Kano plays a Kindle, and then you null shock them, they take 1 to the if they take 1 to the shock, then null will counter the Kindle. Seems good into your mirrors, making your opponent pay AB to stop their card from being prevented, or being used to prevent opponent's cards. Seems really good. Don't know if it will be a main board choice, but one to look at, as well as just having a shock on a. It doesn't block, but having just a shock could be good for Channel Lightning Valley. Some other cards, though, I do want to look at. Absorbent Aether, I think, is a pretty interesting card. We haven't seen a wizard really able to use this effect too much. However, now I think it actually could. Absorbent Aether is a 1/4 defense reaction that makes the next card you play this turn with an effect that does arcane damage to do an extra 2. Notably, since this says card, which that matters, you can pump up your shocks. Same thing with like an Aether Flare. This says card. Same thing with a Cindering Foresight. It says card. Some effects don't pump cards, they pump actions. We'll need to care about that one. Tempest Aurora is, again, very similar. Gets you a bit of extra damage. I don't think this one will see very much play, but I did want to talk about it because it's another pump. Cindering Foresight is a notable one because you can play this one at instant speed. You don't need, it's not an instant. You can't discard it with Osilo, but also the opt could be useful to see if you want to draw the card on top. And then again, Blessing of Aether, very similar. There is one other wizard lightning card that we did see, and that is Comet Storm and Shock. This one costs 2, so an extremely underrated shock if you were going to play it for that. But Comet Storm does do 5 to any target for a 2 resource, so could still just be one that we play. It does block 3, which means technically it is an instant that you can discard that does block. So maybe you play it in Osilo for that, but pretty interesting if you asked me. I think Comet Storm is just a decent card for what Osilo seemingly wants to be doing, which is using their ability to churn through your deck so you can just be as aggressive as possible. Osilo is a hero, though we actually have their weapon. Valzar the Lightning Rod is a lightning wizard weapon. It is a 2-handed staff. If you control an aura permanent with sigil in its name, we don't have any. The only one we have is a 1 mana action that has ward 4. So I assume we'll get more sigils. But the ability will be free. And it has a once per turn instant of amping X, where X is the number of lightning cards you've played this turn. Note that if you play, I don't know this ruling yet, but I would assume that both meld cards are separate, so if they make a lightning meld card, you'll get both. Although currently these are just lightning on one side, but please, that is still important because you're still playing a shock, right? If you have a shock for 0, you play shock for 0, maybe Channel Lightning Valley, another shock for 0. If you have a sigil in play, this will give you +3. So this still increases your damage by a lot. Also, you can't really play Waning Moon because that needs you to play a non-attack action. And if you're playing mostly instants, you can't do that. Maybe something like Cindering Foresight. Great, but again, these are pumping cards, not weapons. Moving on to the inventory, we have a few cards to talk about. I have Alluvian Castellas here because someone brought up that this is about, he has Constella in his name. So I guess Constellas are like the magic stuff. I don't know. Someone brought it up. I just have it here because Brainstorm is a pretty interesting card. This is a 3-cost blue instant that says until the end of your turn, what your hero gains whenever you draw a card this action phase, you can do 1 arcane to any target. Osilo is going to be drawing a lot of cards off of things like Channel Lightning Valley, drawing you a card the first time you do damage, and Osilo himself being able to discard an instant to draw. So if we do see a lot of other draw effects, Brainstorm could be pretty strong. Blink is an instant there. I don't know if you'll need action points, but it's a blue lightning instant. That's why it's here. And Aetherize is a way to negate some other wizard spells in the mirror. Notably, this card will be good in both wizards since negating instants seems pretty strong considering this whole hero is about them. I don't have Poison the Well here either, or Snag, but both of them being blue instants that have some tech options could also be pretty important, since you can just discard them if you don't need them. And then I have some cards down here in the maybe board that, again, don't really have so much synergy with the hero. Waning Moon, you can't activate it because you're not playing non-attack actions, you're playing instants. Snapback, very similar, only works if you played a non-attack action. And again, both work with things like Cindering Foresight, but not with any of your instant effects. And then Aether Wildfire, notably, only increases the damage of action card effects, not off of any card effects, only action cards. So a Stormstrider's Aether Wildfire won't be able to pump up your shocks because it only works on actions. Although if it did, that would be a lot of damage. But it will still pump things like your actual Comet Storm if you end up ever playing a Comet Storm. But with all of that, that is just all of the heroes inside of Rosetta. I'm excited for spoiler season, which should start, I think, pretty soon. Maybe in a few weeks. And I know this video is already going to be long, so I'm just going to end it here. I hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.